Sometimes when it's real quiet and the house smells like cinnamon and something bikini in the oven, rhubarb, maybe, I get taken back. Right back to a summer afternoon in 1955. Ain't that something? All it takes is a smell, or the way the rain taps soft on the porch roof. And there I am again, 17, sittin' by the kitchen window with my elbows on the sill, watchin' the clouds roll in over the cornfields. Lord have mercy, that was a long time ago. But some things just don't stay buried. Now I know y'all probably weren't expectin' to hear a story like this from an old woman like me. I'm 82 years old this spring. My bones creak, my hands don't move like they used to, and I've got a drawer full of reading glasses I never use. I got 5 grandbabies, 2 bad knees, and a heart that still wakes me up some nights thinking about that summer. Back then, we lived in a white farmhouse out near Sterling, Iowa. One of those quiet little towns with a single grocery, a church that rang the hour, and neighbors who knew the color of your laundry line. People didn't lock their doors. They didn't have to. But I'll tell you what, that July, things changed. And they never really went back. Not for me. Not for my family. I've held this story close for over 60 years. Tucked it deep down under pie recipes and Sunday dresses, under birthdays and funerals and Christmas stockings. You see, silence can be a mighty heavy thing to carry. Folks say time heals well. Maybe it does for some. But for others, it just makes the wound quieter and sharper. It's funny, I wasn't even thinking about any of this today. I was just trying to bake something sweet to take over to my neighbor's boy, who just got his tonsils out. But then I opened that drawer in the pantry, the one, full of old cookie cutters and tape that don't stick, and there it was. A ribbon, faded red, tied in a bow. And wouldn't you know it, it was hers. Sitting right there like it hadn't been moved in decades. And just like that, boom, the memory hit me right in the chest. Sally Burke, that was her name. Pretty little thing. Brown curls, voice like a Sunday hymn. She lived just down the road. 17 years old. And that summer, she disappeared. Just vanished, like a breath in winter. Folks said maybe she ran away. But I knew better. We all did. That week, the week she went missing, it rained nearly every day. The whole town smelled like wet dirt and burnt coffee. But our house, it smelled like shame, like guilt settling into the wallpaper. You see, that was the summer the police came knocking. That was the summer they went down into our cellar. That was the summer they found Sally's dress, her hair ribbon, and the doll. And that was the summer my little brother, Harold, was taken away. I never told anyone what I saw that night. Never said a word about the blood on his shirt, or the box under his bed. But lately, I've been thinking, maybe it's time. Maybe it's time I told the truth, or at least the piece of it that's mine to tell. Because secrets, well, they don't get lighter with age. So, if you're still with me, stay close. There's more to this than folks ever knew. And I've got a question for you. If someone you love did something unforgivable, would you speak up? Or would you stay silent like I did? Back then, Sterling wasn't much more than a dot on the map, a speck of cornfields and dirt roads, with a handful of houses and a church steeple that ticked away the Sundays like a clock. I was just a girl then, barely 16, with dreams bigger than our town's little post office. I remember the sun felt warmer in those days, and the sky seemed endless, stretching over the fields where my daddy worked from dawn till dusk. We didn't have much, no fancy cars or radios that played every song on the hour. Heck, we didn't even have a pot to pee in, if you ask me, but somehow we made do with what we had. That was just the way things were back then. I'd spend mornings helping Mama in the kitchen, the smell of fresh bread rising like a prayer through the house. She always had a smile that could light up even the darkest winter days, and I'd watch her soft hands knead dough as she told me stories of her own childhood, long gone and far away. We believed in the goodness of folks, neighbors who'd stop by for a glass of sweet tea, kids running barefoot down the dusty roads, and Sunday picnics under the big oak tree. Life moved slower then, and I was young enough to think it'd never change. I believed that kindness was the strongest thing there was, and that people always found their way back to each other, no matter what. That's the kind of girl I was, hopeful, innocent, and a little stubborn about holding on to the light. My brother Harold was 2 years younger, a quiet boy with more books than toys, always with his nose buried in something no one else seemed to understand. He was no spring chicken, but he never chased after the rowdy games like the other boys. Daddy didn't have much patience for that. A real man doesn't waste his time with nonsense, he'd say, his voice heavy with disappointment. Mama, she'd just sigh, her eyes soft and full of worry, but she never pushed him to be someone he wasn't. Harold had a heart of gold, bless his soul, but he kept it wrapped up tight. Sometimes I'd catch him staring out the window, like he was seeing something no one else could. That was Harold, quiet, gentle, and maybe just a little lost. I spent my days dreaming of places beyond Sterling, of cities with tall buildings and bright lights, where I could wear dresses that twirled and sing songs that made people smile. But mostly I dreamed of peace, a peace that seemed as far away as the stars. We all did. Our town was a place where everybody knew your business before you even said a word, and secrets were hard to keep. But some things were buried deep behind locked doors and whispered prayers. I remember the rhythm of our life, the church bells calling us to Sunday service, the summer fairs with ribbons and homemade pies, the long walks down to the creek where Harold and I would skip stones and talk about anything and nothing at all. Those were the days when laughter came easy and the world felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something good to happen. I was young, yes, but I felt the weight of the future pressing down sometimes, like a shadow I couldn't shake. That summer, though, something shifted. The air grew heavy, and the quiet that once felt comforting started to press in. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment everything began to unravel, the beginning of the story I've carried inside me all these years. It was a time when the things we didn't say screamed louder than any words ever could. When the smile on Mama's face was a little too tight, and Daddy's silence was colder than the Iowa wind. I was just a girl holding onto hope and baking rhubarb pies, believing that love and kindness would be enough to keep us safe. But life has a way of teaching you lessons you never asked for. And looking back now, I wonder if we all saw the cracks forming, if we just didn't want to believe they were real. I wonder if I could have done something different, said something sooner. But that's the thing about childhood, isn't it? It's full of moments you only understand much later, when the years have worn away the innocence and left you with memories that ache. So here I am, many years on, still holding on to those days. Because they were mine. Because they shaped me. Because even now, when the wind blows just right and the smell of rhubarb pie fills the kitchen, I'm taken back to a time when life was simpler, and yet somehow so much harder than I ever imagined. I remember the day it all started like it was yesterday, though the years have a way of mulling the details sometimes. It was one of those sticky July afternoons when the heat hangs heavy in the air and the sky threatens a storm, but the rain's slow to fall. The kind of day where you can smell the earth breathing under the sun, and the whole town feels like it's holding its breath. That's when she showed up. Sally Burke. Sweet as honeysuckle and as bright as a church bell on a Sunday morning. She wasn't just the girl down the street, no, ma'am. Sally had this light about her that made folks stop and take notice. She sang in the church choir, you see, and when she lifted her voice, it was like the whole world held still just to listen. That girl had dreams. You could see it in the way she looked at the sky and the way she laughed like it might never end. I was just a kid, but I could tell she was special. Something about her made me feel like the world was a little bigger than Sterling. That afternoon, I was sitting on the front steps, just minding my own business, when Sally came walking up the road, her dress swaying with every step. She smiled at me, and Lord, that smile, it made my heart skip, and I didn't even understand why at the time. I was only 16 after all. But I'll tell you what, there was something about that moment, something that felt like a spark you don't see coming. I couldn't put my finger on it then, but I felt it deep down in my chest, a kind of quiet knowing that things were about to change. Now, you gotta understand, back then, life was simple, but it wasn't always easy. My ma and pa, they were good people, hardworking and honest, but there was a heaviness between them you couldn't shake, like a cloud hanging over the dinner table. Pa was a man of few words, and when he spoke, you listened. Mama had this gentle way about her, but sometimes I caught a flicker of worry in her eyes when she looked at Harold. And Harold, well, he kept to himself more and more, his eyes always distant, like he was carrying a secret he didn't dare share. But I was too young, or maybe too hopeful, to see what was really going on under that roof. Sally didn't belong to our family, but she became a part of our story faster than I could keep up. She was friends with Harold, or at least I thought so. They'd sometimes walk together down by the creek, talking softly like they had all the time in the world. I didn't understand it all, but I remember feeling jealous sometimes, like they had something I didn't. And maybe they did. That day, Sally told me about a letter she'd gotten from a boy in town, our real fancy fella who'd moved away last year. She showed me the words, all fancy and flowery, saying he missed her and hoped to see her again someday. I could see the way her eyes shined when she read it. That letter was more than just paper and ink. It was a promise, a hope, a world beyond Sterling. I was happy for her, but there was a pang in my heart, too. Maybe I was just scared. Scared of what the future might bring. I didn't know it then, but that letter was the start of something bigger, something that would rip through the quiet of our town like a summer storm. I was too young to understand the weight of it all, but I could feel the tension creeping in. That night, as the crickets sang their lullaby and the wind whispered secrets through the corn, I lay in bed wondering why my heart wouldn't stop racing, why I couldn't shake the feeling that the world as I knew it was changing, and maybe, just maybe, not for the better. There was a knock at the door that evening, not the polite kind you expect from neighbors, but a knock that sent chills straight to your bones. The kind that makes you freeze and pray it's not the police. And sure enough, it was them, with their badges and their questions, poking and prying into a life that had seemed so quiet, so ordinary, just hours before. That was when the real story began. The one I kept locked inside me for decades. The one that broke my family and stained our home with secrets. I didn't know it then, but that knock was the turning point. The moment when innocence slipped through my fingers and the shadows started closing in. You see, sometimes life hands you moments that change everything. A letter, a smile, a knock on the door. And you can't go back. All you can do is try to hold on to the pieces and figure out how to live with what's left. So I ask you, if you had a choice to look away, to pretend you didn't see, would you? Or would you face the truth, no matter how painful? You know, life has a way of sneaking up on you, especially when you least expect it. One moment, you're sitting on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the cornfields, and the next, everything's shifted, like the ground beneath your feet's given way. That summer, after Sally disappeared, our house wasn't the same. The quiet that had once felt like comfort turned into something heavy, thick enough to choke on. I remember how the air in the kitchen felt colder, how Mama's hands trembled just a little when she handed me a plate, and how Pa hardly looked me in the eye no more. Lord, I wanted to ask them what was wrong, but I was scared. Scared that whatever it was, I wouldn't like the answer. Then came the knock, not the polite kind you get from neighbors borrowing sugar, but the kind that rattles your insides. The police coming down to the basement, taking away Harold in handcuffs. I remember standing in the doorway, the wooden floor creaking beneath my feet, watching as my little brother was led away like a criminal. And the worst part? He didn't say a word. Not a single one. Just those big sad eyes that never met mine. I wanted to scream at the officers, tell them they were wrong, that Harold was my baby brother, but I couldn't. I was frozen, caught between fear and disbelief. That basement, well, that place wasn't just a cellar anymore. It became a prison of secrets. The place where they found Sally's dress, her ribbon, and that old doll. The same basement Harold had the only key to. That part of the story never left my mind. How could it? It haunted me like a ghost, whispering in the quiet hours of the night. Our neighbors, who once greeted us with smiles and waves, started looking at us sideways. Whispers floated through the town, accusations wrapped in polite words. She must have run off, some said. Others shook their heads, eyes heavy with judgment. I could feel their stares like daggers, cutting through the fragile shell of our family. Mama, poor soul, carried a weight that broke her down day by day. She stopped singing in the kitchen, and her eyes lost that spark. Pa, well, he turned to the bottle, drowning his shame in whiskey, till his breath smelled of regret and loss. The man who once held us all up was gone, swallowed by sorrow. And me? I was just a girl stuck in the middle of it all, trying to make sense of a world that didn't add up. The hardest part wasn't what the neighbors said or even what the police believed. It was what I felt inside, the gnawing doubt, the shame that wrapped itself around my heart. I knew things I never told, things I wished I could forget. Like the night I saw Harold come home with cuts on his hands, the way he winced but said nothing. Or the small box I found tucked away in his desk drawer, filled with strands of hair tied with a ribbon. My heart broke a little every time I thought about it, but I stayed silent. Because that was the thing about family, sometimes you protect them, even when you know it hurts. I wrestled with a storm of emotions I didn't have words for. Anger at Harold for what might have happened, fear of what the future held, shame that we couldn't keep our secrets safe, and guilt, oh, the guilt for not speaking up, for being too scared to stand up for what was right. I was torn between loyalty and truth, and the weight of that choice nearly crushed me. There was no one to lean on, no one to whisper to in the dark. My friends kept their distance, probably afraid of what being near our family might mean. Even my own heart seemed to turn cold at times, a defense mechanism against the pain I couldn't escape. I longed for the days when life was simple, when laughter came easy and love was a given, not a question mark. That summer taught me that sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought out loud, but in the quiet corners of your mind and soul. It's in the moments you hold your breath, swallow your fears, and pretend everything's fine when it's not. It's in the silence that follows the storm, the silence that breaks families apart and leaves scars no one can see. And I want you to know that silence is a dangerous thing. It can protect you, sure, but it can also destroy. And sometimes the hardest thing to do is to break it. So I ask you now, with all the weight of those years behind me, if you were standing where I was, caught between love and truth, between fear and courage, what would you do? Would you speak up? Or would you stay silent like I did? I remember it like it was carved into the very air around me, the day everything broke, the day the world stopped turning and my heart froze cold. It was late July, the summer sun hanging heavy and unforgiving in the sky, when I saw my life change forever. I can still hear the tick of the old clock in the hallway, but that day it might as well have stopped. Time didn't move. Not for me. Not in that moment. We were sitting in the parlor, the whole family forced together by something heavier than just the heat. Mama sat stiff as a statue, her fingers clutching the worn quilt on her lap. Pa didn't say a word, just stared at the floor, his jaw clenched so tight I thought it might snap. Harold was there too, his eyes downcast, the weight of the world pressing on his thin shoulders. And then came the knock that no one wanted to hear again, but knew was coming. The sheriff walked in, his face grave, and Mama let out a sob that cracked the silence like glass. The news was worse than we'd dared imagine. Sally Burke's body had been found, not far from town, in the woods where the corn met the trees. Cold, still, gone, and with her, the last thread holding my family together snapped clean. I saw Mama crumble, a wave of sorrow wash over her until she was nothing but a broken woman in a faded dress. Pa's hands shook as he lit his pipe, the smoke curling up like the ghosts of better days. Harold just sat there, silent, like he was already a man buried beneath the weight of it all. I wanted to scream, to run, to hide, but I couldn't move. I was stuck, frozen in the worst nightmare a sister could face. The police came again, with questions, with accusations wrapped in polite words, with eyes that searched my family like we were guilty until proven innocent. I saw it in their eyes, suspicion, doubt, fear. And worse, I saw it in my own reflection. Because for all those years, I'd been holding on to a secret that felt heavier than the sky. The night I saw Harold come home with blood on his hands, the ribbon I found hidden away, the silence I kept like a stone in my throat. I lost more than a girl that day. I lost my family's innocence. I lost the warm kitchen where laughter lived. I lost the dreams I had as a child, dreams that kindness would always win, that love would protect. I lost trust. I lost peace. And in that moment, I became something else, someone who understood that sometimes love is not enough to shield you from the darkness inside the ones you hold dear. I remember looking at Harold, my little brother, and seeing a stranger, a boy I didn't know anymore. And the worst part? I knew, deep down, that he was no innocent. But he was my blood, and that tore me apart in ways I still can't explain. I wanted to hate him, to condemn him, but all I felt was sorrow for him, for Sally, for the family that was slipping through my fingers like sand. That day broke me, but it also changed me. It forced me to grow up faster than any girl should have to. It taught me the sharp edges of silence and the weight of secrets. It made me realize that some truths are too heavy to bear alone, and some love comes with a price that no heart should have to pay. I carry that day with me, the day time stopped, the day my world shattered. It's a shadow that follows me, a whisper I can't silence. And yet, somehow, it's also the reason I'm here, speaking to you now. Because holding on to the pain doesn't make it go away. Sharing it might just be the first step to healing. So I ask you this, when the people you love do the unthinkable, when the world you know falls apart, what do you hold on to? And what do you let go? After everything that happened, the world felt different, colder somehow, like the warmth had been sucked right out of the summer air. I went from being a girl with dreams and a hopeful heart to someone who learned the weight of silence in the hardest way possible. It's funny how the house can stay the same, but everything inside changes. The same walls, the same floors, but the laughter gone and the shadows stretched longer. That's what my life was like after that summer, like living in a room where the light never quite reached. For a long time, I just drifted through the days. The seasons passed, but I felt frozen, stuck in a place between what was and what could have been. Mama was gone by then. She burned out from the shame and grief that no mother should have to carry. Pa, too, faded away, lost to his bottle and his regrets. And me? I was left holding the pieces of a family that didn't feel like mine anymore. I'd sit on the porch, watching the cornfields sway in the breeze, the same fields that had once promised so much life and hope. But now all I could see was emptiness, rows and rows of silence stretching out under an endless sky. The neighbors stopped visitin', and I stopped reaching out. It was easier to keep to myself, to hold my tongue, to bury those memories deep where no one else could find them. I stopped believin' in a lot of things back then. I stopped believin' that kindness would save us. I stopped believin' that people always come back no matter what. That hope I had as a young girl, it slipped through my fingers like dust. I was different, not the same Linny who dreamed under the wide Iowa sky. I was quieter, harder to know, with a heart full of questions I didn't dare ask out loud. Sometimes I wondered if I deserved to be happy, if I even deserved to be forgiven. The guilt was like a shadow I carried everywhere, whispering that maybe I could have done more, said more, been more. But what? How? When the truth is so heavy and the people you love have broken in ways you can't fix. The days turned into years, and I found myself alone more than I cared to admit. The silence wasn't just around me, it was inside me. A hollow place where the echoes of that summer played on repeat. I'd stare out the window for hours, thinking about what could have been different, about the life that slipped away before it really began. And sometimes, when the night was still and the stars hung low, I'd cry for the family I lost, for the girl who never came home, for the brother who vanished into the wind. But in that quiet, I also started to find something else, a kind of peace, maybe. Not the kind that erases pain, but the kind that teaches you how to live with it. I learned to breathe again, slow and steady, to let the memories wash over me without drowning. I found comfort in small things, a warm cup of tea, the sound of a song on the radio, the feel of a soft blanket on my lap. I learned that healing isn't a straight road, and forgiveness is a journey, not a destination. I'm not the same person I was before that summer, and maybe I never will be. But I'm still here, still standing, still trying to make sense of the pieces. And maybe that's enough. Maybe it's enough to say that even when the world breaks you, you can still find a way to keep going. To hold on to the good, even when it feels like there's very little left. So now, as I sit here and tell you this story, I want you to remember something. Life isn't always fair. It's messy and painful and full of things we don't understand. But in the quiet moments, in the spaces between the pain, there's still hope. There's still light. And there's still a chance to find peace, even if it takes a lifetime. I want you to think about your own silence, the things you keep hidden, the stories you're afraid to tell. What would happen if you let them out? If you let someone in? Because sometimes the hardest part isn't living through the storm, it's finding the courage to stand in the quiet after it's passed. It's strange how life can hand you moments of light when you least expect it, like finding a single star in a sky full of clouds. For years after that summer, I was wrapped up in shadows, moving through days that felt heavier than the last. But then, something shifted. Maybe it was a whisper from the past, or a soft nudge from somewhere deep inside. I can't say for sure. All I know is that one day I woke up and felt just a little different. I'd been keeping to myself, as I always did, when the mailman dropped a letter in the box. It wasn't much, just a note from a woman named Ruth, a neighbor I barely knew. She wrote that she'd been thinking of me, remembering the old days when the town was full of laughter and church picnics, and she wanted to stop by for a visit. At first, I wasn't sure if I wanted to open that door again, not after all the years of silence. but something in her words stirred a tiny flicker inside me, a hope I thought had long been lost. When Ruth came over that afternoon, she didn't bring pity or questions. She brought a smile and a pie, warm and fresh, just like the ones Mama used to bake. We sat on the porch, drinking sweet tea, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe I wasn't so alone. We talked about everything and nothing, about the seasons changing and the corn growing tall, about old friends and new beginnings. It was simple, but it was enough. That day was the first step back into the world for me, a small step, but a start. It reminded me that even after the darkest nights, the sun still rises. And sometimes, the smallest kindness can light the way through the fog. I started to find little ways to reach out, to connect. I helped Mrs. Miller down the street carry her groceries. I joined the church group again, not to pray for answers, but just to sit among familiar faces and hear the gentle hum of community. Each small act was like planting a seed, a quiet promise that life could grow again, even in the cracked soil of a broken past. And with each passing day, I felt my heart soften just a little. The guilt and the grief didn't vanish, no, they still lingered like shadows at the edge of my mind, but they no longer held me captive. I learned to carry them without losing myself. And in that, I found a kind of strength I didn't know I had. It wasn't about forgetting or forgiving right away. It was about finding peace in the messy, complicated way life unfolds. About understanding that healing isn't a straight line, but a winding road filled with detours and setbacks. But most importantly, it was about learning to believe in hope again. I think that's what gave me the courage to start telling my story, not just the parts that were easy, but the parts that hurt too. Because sometimes, sharing your truth can be the greatest act of bravery there is. It's like opening a window in a room that's been closed tight for decades, letting the fresh air in and the darkness out. And so here I am, telling you this now, with a heart that's still healing, but also learning to hope. Because life gave me a second chance, even when I thought all was lost. And maybe, just maybe, it's never too late for any of us. So I ask you this, when the world feels heavy and your heart is weary, what small step can you take to find your own flicker in the dark? What's that one thing that could light your way forward? There comes a time in life when you realize holding on to the past only keeps you chained to a place you don't want to be. I carried that story, heavy as a stone, for so many years, like a secret tucked deep inside my heart, whispering in the dark. But somewhere along the way, I found the courage to say, enough. That story isn't going to own me anymore. Not today. Not ever again. I made a choice. I chose to live, to step out from under that long, dark shadow and find the light waiting beyond. It wasn't easy, Lord knows it wasn't. The past doesn't just fade away because you say it does. It lingers like the scent of old wood and rain, like the echo of a song you thought you forgot. But I decided that I would no longer let it break me. I would carry it with me, yes, but I wouldn't let it define me. I remember the day I took that box, the one I'd hidden away for so many years, and brought it out into the sunlight. It held ribbons, letters, and memories wrapped in silence. I sat on the porch, the breeze soft on my skin, and one by one I let those things go. I didn't burn them or bury them. I didn't try to erase the past. I simply set them free, just like I was freeing myself. That act wasn't about forgetting. It was about forgiving, not just others, but myself too. Forgiving the little girl who was scared to speak up, the sister who stayed silent out of love and fear. I realized that forgiveness isn't a single moment, but a journey. And I'm still walking it every day. Choosing to live meant opening my heart again. To love, to hope, to trust, even when it felt like those things were fragile as glass. It meant accepting that life doesn't always turn out the way we dreamed, but that doesn't mean it's not worth living. I found strength in the small things: a smile from a stranger, the warmth of the sun on my face, the laughter of my grandbabies chasing each other in the yard. Those moments became my new story. I won't lie, sometimes the pain still visits me. The memories, the questions, the what-ifs. But I greet them differently now. Not with fear or shame, but with kindness. Because they're part of me and part of the life I've lived. They've shaped me, yes, but they don't have the power to break me anymore. I'm not perfect. I'm not whole. But I'm here. I'm breathing. And I'm choosing to move forward with grace and gratitude. I'm choosing to live without regrets, without bitterness, just simply to live. So, if there's one thing I want you to take away from my story, it's this. No matter what shadows you carry, no matter how heavy your heart feels, you have the power to choose. To choose healing over hurt, hope over despair, life over silence. I chose mine. What about you? You know, looking back on all those years, I realized the story I lived through wasn't just about loss or secrets or silence. It was about something deeper, about the way life teaches you hard truths that don't come in shiny packages or easy lessons. The kind of truths that settle in your bones and change the way you see the world, even when you don't want them to. I learned that love isn't always enough to fix what's broken. That sometimes, the people you hold closest can carry their own battles, ones you might never understand. And sometimes, the silence you keep, the things you don't say, they're just as powerful as the words you speak. Silence can protect, yes, but it can also wound. It can build walls where bridges should be. But I also learned that holding on to pain doesn't make you strong. True strength is in knowing when to let go, when to open your heart again, even if it's trembling. It's in the courage to forgive, not for the sake of others, but for your own peace. Because carrying grudges and regrets is like drinking poison and hoping someone else will suffer. I've come to understand that life is messy and complicated, full of shades of gray instead of black and white. And that's okay. That's the human condition. We all have our stories, our wounds, our regrets. What matters is how we choose to carry them. Whether we let them weigh us down or use them to grow. Maybe that's the hardest lesson of all, that healing isn't about forgetting or pretending everything's fine. It's about accepting the past, with all its cracks and scars, and still choosing to move forward. Choosing to live with grace, even when the road is rough. And here's the thing I want to say to you, whoever you are, listening to this old woman's tale, maybe it's time to stop waiting. Waiting for the right moment, the perfect apology, the clear sign from above. Maybe it's time to stop holding your breath and start breathing again. To stop living in the shadows of what might have been and start stepping into the light of what still can be. It doesn't mean you forget the pain. It means you give yourself permission to find joy anyway. To find hope in the smallest things: a kind word, a morning sunrise, a hand to hold. To believe that even broken things can still shine. I've lived through more than most could bear, and I'm still here, still standing, still learning. And I tell you this not because I have all the answers, but because I've learned that sometimes the simple act of choosing to live fully, even imperfectly, is the greatest victory of all. So, if you're carrying a secret, a sorrow, or a silence that's grown too heavy, maybe it's time to set it down, even if just for a moment. Maybe it's time to tell your story or listen to someone else's. Because in the sharing, there's healing. And in the healing, there's life. I hope my story can be a small light for you, as it has been for me. Not because it's perfect or pretty, but because it's real. Because it's human. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Well, now, here we are at the end of this long road I've walked through memories and heartaches. I hope you've been sitting comfortably, maybe with a cup of tea in hand, because stories like mine deserve that kind of gentle space. You see, this story, it's not just about what happened all those years ago in a small Iowa town. No, it's about what we carry with us every day, even when no one's looking. It's about the weight of silence, the power of love, and the courage it takes to keep going, even when your heart feels like it might break. I've told you about my brother, Harold, and the secrets our family held close like a fragile glass. I've shared the shadows that followed us, the silence that wrapped itself tight around my soul. But this story isn't only about the past. It's about today and tomorrow and the moments in between where we decide who we want to be, no matter what our history says. Sometimes, when the evening sun paints the sky in soft shades of pink and gold, I sit on my porch and wonder about love. Real love, the kind that sticks with you through the storms and the quiet times, the kind that doesn't fade with years or distance. I ask myself, does true love always come back? Does it find its way home, no matter how lost it seems? I think about Harold. I think about Sally. And I think about the life we all dreamed of, the life we hoped for but never quite got to live. Sometimes I feel like he remembers, like somewhere deep inside. Despite everything, there's a part of him that holds on to what was good, what was real. Maybe that's a foolish hope. Or maybe it's the kind of hope we all need to hold on to if we want to find peace. And that's the question I leave with you, dear friend. Do you believe in that kind of love? The kind that returns, that forgives, that heals? Or do you think some things are lost forever no matter how much we wish otherwise? I don't have the answer, not really. But I do know this life is full of mysteries, and sometimes the greatest courage is in believing in something unseen, in opening your heart just a little wider, even when it's scared, in trusting that the light can find you again, even after the darkest nights. Thank you for listening to my story, for sitting with me on this journey through shadows and light. I hope it's given you something, a moment of peace, a spark of hope, or simply the comfort of knowing you're not alone. Because no matter what our stories hold, we all share this human experience of longing, loss, love, and the search for meaning. So hold on to your stories. Tell them when you can. Listen when others share theirs. And maybe, just maybe, in that sharing, we find the healing we all need. Until next time, take care of yourself and those you love. And remember, love is a journey, not a destination. Sometimes it wanders, sometimes it hides, but it always waits for us to come back. And sometimes, just sometimes, it remembers.